Welcome to Forum 360 on Fusion, your PBS channel and your Rubber City radio stations. We're co-sponsored by the Shaw Jewish Community Center. This is Leslie Ungar, your host today. Crime and punishment. We've all heard about it. What do we really know about it? The United States has relatively little intermediate punishment for crime. Offenders are either incarcerated or they're given probation. Because seriousness of crime does not fall neatly into two components, sentencing often errs in one direction or another. It is either too harsh, putting behind bars people whose crimes do not warrant it, or too lenient, giving routine probation to people whose crimes deserve stronger punishment. These realities have encouraged states to consider sentencing alternatives that punish but do not involve incarceration. To talk with us today about alternative sentencing is a pioneer in the judicial system, municipal court judge Lisa Coates. Judge Coates has 12 years of judicial experience. Prior to being on the bench, she was an attorney with the federal government, the VA, a civil law firm, and the prosecutor's office. She established the court's first specialized court, a mental health court known as STRIDE. Successful treatment results in developing excellence. She's a proponent of intermediate sanctions in her court and in the Stowe municipal system. Welcome, Judge Coates.
Welcome. Thank you very much for having me today.
I have to ask you, before we get started about something more serious, do people tease you with the "here come the judge," or were you lucky enough to be too young to have to live through that?
I've never had that happen to me, actually.
Really?
I get more of the comments about, you're too young to be a judge.
Well, that's a compliment.
I think that is a compliment, very much so.
Absolutely. It means your children have not aged you too much yet.
Well, yeah, luckily we have hair color for those gray hairs.
There are two, let me ask you, just being a judge, you have 3 children.
I do.
Starting their teens.
Starting their teens, yes.
How does being a judge in the courtroom, how does that help or not help you in your family with your children and different opinions and sometimes, different emotions? Does that help you or does that hinder you as a mom?
You know what? I have a running joke at home. I say I'm a judge at home and a mom at work and vice versa. I say that all the time. I do bring home my work to my kids. Not the stuff that I don't want them to hear about, but I do talk to them a lot about drugs and alcohol and the influence of others, changing their behavior, getting involved with the wrong friends. So I think that is a positive. They're very used to police officers coming to the house, and so they have a real different perspective than I think a lot of other kids do. So that's been always, I think, a positive. I try to keep the politics and things that happen on TV away from them a little bit, especially if it can get a little nasty. I don't want them to be put through that. So there's pros and cons to being a mom and that's a judge.
like anything, I'm sure.
Yes.
There are 2 basic arguments for sentencing alternatives. One is practical, that many prisons and local jails are overcrowded and resources are stretched. So sentencing alternatives can alleviate crowding and at less cost than expanding incarceration capacity. We can't just keep making more jails or bigger jails.
Correct.
First of all, is that true? Is that are your local alternatives, are they overcrowded? And is the alternative sentencing less expensive?
Both of those are true. It wasn't very long on the TV that you noticed that a whole bunch of people were released from the Summit County Jail.
Yes.
And though, of course, your felons, they get priority in the county. They should get priority. These are much more serious crimes. So the misdemeanants get released, and the municipal court judges were the ones that struggle to find places to put or house defendants who need to have incarceration, and so that becomes a difficulty. So with that, you need to be a little more creative in your sentencing, and that's where these programs like mental health court come in.
Now, I really had never thought about luck as it applied to someone who was charged with criminal or misdemeanor offenses, but if one person commits a crime and it just so happens that the judges are the courts, jails are more overcrowded, then they could just be lucky and not sentenced for the same crime that somebody else committed, and they just had more room in the jails. Is that true?
It can happen, yes, or depending on the jurisdiction, if they have other alternative jails. Luckily, in our jurisdiction, we have some other local jails beyond the Summit County Jail to house folks if they need to be incarcerated. So yes, that can be a luck thing sometimes.
Or an unluck thing.
Or an unluck thing, yes.
The second argument is from principle for alternative sentencing, is that alternatives provide more latitude for making the punishment fit the crime. Is that true?
That is true, very much. And we try to focus, like you were talking earlier, you said there's really two roads, incarceration or rehabilitation. And we do really, especially in municipal courts, really focus in on the rehabilitation. And that's why these specialized courts have become so popular, is to really start honing in on some of the problems that are bringing defendants back into the court system over and over again. Why do we keep having recidivism?
Now, would you say in your court, is it the cost and the resources of putting people in jail, or is it the latitude that alternative sentencing gives you? What would you say more fits the reasons that you use alternative sentencing?
Probably we don't have any location for them to go to jail. And it's a cost. It really is. It is very expensive to put people in jail. And if you can try to reduce that jail time and find another way to get them back on track, then it is definitely cost measure. But it's not all about cost, because there's safety issues and other issues that you as a judge must consider in deciding whether somebody goes to jail or whether they go on the rehabilitation route.
Now, you received your law degree from Case Western Reserve Law School.
I did.
Was alternative sentencing taught in law school, or when and how did you become aware of it?
No. Law school is really meant to teach you about how to become a good lawyer, not just the practical, but how to think like a lawyer. So the things I learned about being a judge, I learned either being a prosecutor, being in the courtroom all the time, or have learned from fellow judges. And the mental health court and coming up with some other creative ways to sentence have been just my 12 years of experience, along with other judges, trying to come up with creative ways to help people without incarceration being the end result.
Now, do you have any idea, whether it's Case Western or any other law school, is alternative sentencing something that's taught any more now than it was when you?
I do not know. I have not been back to law school for a very long time, so if they are honing in on those type of sentencing alternatives, I would not be aware, but it would be something that they should be addressing.
Well, I would think they would want you to come and talk to them about alternative sentencing so that they could know.
Yes.
If you're listening out there. You started STRIDE, Successful Treatment Results in Developing Excellence. Tell us, what does that mean to people that think that what happens in a courtroom doesn't affect them, that think they don't have any connection or don't know anyone that's going to be involved? What does STRIDE mean to your general community?
What it means is STRIDE, the whole purpose for why we picked STRIDE was we have a runner. The front page of our documents have several runners running down the road. And the purpose of STRIDE is to try to get people back on track, back in the race, to start working on getting sobriety and mental health stability, and then start to, after getting that stability, start to achieve some goals to get out of this track they're on of recommitting offenses or getting themselves back into the criminal justice system. We not only want to get them stable mentally, but our goal is really to try to get them employment, get them their physical health back, get them back as productive citizens. Now,
when you said when you were talking about the runners, who all is involved when you or someone comes up with the idea of alternative sentencing? Who all gets involved in that
It
process?
is a big team, very big team. First of all, when we started the court, I had to have a treatment provider. I am not a doctor. I do not know how to diagnose a mental illness. I've had to learn a lot of that, different things about mental illness during the course of this, something, again, never trained at school for. So we have a treatment team that is, we work with an agency called Community Support Services here in Akron. They handle all of our mental health courts in Summit County, and they provide our case worker, they provide our doctor, and they also provide some of the things like volunteering, jobs, things of that nature. And then I have my probation department and myself. And then we get the lawyers out there involved. They do not participate in mental health court, but they certainly, we get them an understanding of what's going on so they can advise clients, or prosecutors can advise the judge, this is somebody we think might be eligible for this court.
So if they are eligible, then is it a choice that the person that's being charged has, whether they want to go the traditional path or the alternative?
Or the alternative path, yes. They have to agree to be in this. They have to be willing to take their medications, to seek the treatment, and they volunteer for this. If they do not want to do this, then they either go towards incarceration or regular rehabilitation, because this is a very big undertaking for them.
Now, do you have any statistics, or do you have any just kind of, gut statistics as to what percentage would choose Stride and what percentage choose the more traditional path?
I can tell you that we've got numbers from when we started the program back in 2010 to the middle of last year. We do our numbers every summer, and 62 people were entered into the program to be looked at. Some were not eligible. And 42 ended up in the program. So about 10 of those chose, I think it was 8 of them, chose not to do it. Now, understand that some of them go in, though, with the wrong idea. I want to avoid jail, so I will do this. So I think that's why sometimes our unsuccessful rate is a little bit higher, because some folks decide, some participants decide 1 or 2 months into this, whoa, this is way too much for me.
I'll just serve my time.
I'm going to go to jail, right? Exactly. Or they just they walk away from the program. It's kind of a
compliment. If you're harder than jail, in some ways it's kind of a compliment.
It is a very hard program, and I warn them going in. This is not a way to get out of jail. If you think that, you're going to fail the program anyway, and you're going to end up in jail. So you need to be willing to undergo this program. And it's 24 months. It is a 24-month program. I don't shorten the program. They are there the whole 24 months.
Now, being there the whole 24 months means what to them? You see them how often in that 24 months? How often do you see them?
I see them every week, especially for the first 6 to 8 months. And as they progress through the program, that number starts to reduce. So as a reward, we kind of work on what's called a reward and sanctions philosophy. One of those rewards might be you are doing really well. You're not on you're taking your medication required by the doctor. You've stayed off all the substances that you're not supposed to be taking, and you're doing really well. So rather than come see me every week, you can come see me every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. Never do I go beyond 3 weeks for any person, though.
Now, what kinds of crimes are people committing that they're eligible for Stride as an alternative?
Definitely thefts, domestic violences, as long as the victim is okay with it. Generally, the domestics are involving a spouse or parents because of the mental illness, not because they're a violent person generally. It's just they have gone off their medications and they've gotten violent because of that. We do not permit people with drinking and driving charges or any sex crimes or any crimes involving children or weapons. Those would be prohibited in this program.
So they see you once a week or once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. They have to stay off of illegal substances and on legal substances. What are some other things that they have to do during this time?
Okay. During the first, there's 5 steps in the program, but I really break it down into 1 year and 2 years. Year 1 is stability. you need to stay off your medications. For them, that might be one of the hardest things. That is a reoccurring problem among people with mental illness, is they feel better, I don't want to be on these medications anymore. So we need about 1 year of consistent medication, taking it, finding the right medication, and staying on it.
And how do your professionals assess that someone is staying on their medication?
So we usually, that's the wonderful thing about the judicial supervision, is like we have somebody right now in the program who has gone off their medication, and we can see it within 1 to 2 weeks. So before they've recommitted a crime and gotten into more trouble that might keep them might get them back into jail, we noticed it very quickly. We brought it to their attention. Their doctor saw it, their caseworker saw it. We all came together and said, you're going to go on to medication monitoring, where you have to come in every day and take your medication in front of a nurse or a doctor.
But they can stay in the program?
They stay in the program, yes.
Today, we are looking at alternative sentencing with Judge Lisa Coates, Municipal Court, Stowe, and the creator of one of the alternative sentencing in the area. You're a huge advocate of alternative sentencing. Can you give me some examples of alternatives that you've implemented? So they've gone through this program, and then what? After the 2 years, you said there's kind of a 1 year and a 2 years. So now it's 2 years.
Right.
Do they have any connection still to the court, or do they graduate and go on to the bigger society?
After year 1, when they've gotten their stability, year 2 is really starting to get them back and integrated with society. And so that includes the jobs. Maybe some of them cannot work a job because of their mental illness, but we get them volunteering. I try to get them out of their house. This is where we try to do mentoring programs, and we try to get them re-engaged in society. And the goal at graduation, I always tell them, this is like a bird. I'm sending the bird out of its nest to fly on their own. But we don't just throw them out of the nest and say, good luck, hope you can fly. I will not graduate somebody, even if it's 24 months, if I don't think they're ready. But when I do think they're ready, we still keep them with community support services, or at least make sure that they have the proper medical or mental health treatment continuing. And we have always, some of them come back and visit the court occasionally, and will tell us what's going on in their life, and try and get a rah-rah moment with us and get re-engaged. But we're essentially done with them at the 2 year mark. But I always tell them, Thursday afternoons at 2 o'clock, you are welcome to come at any point in time and say hi, tell me how you're doing, and if you need to talk to our probation department or to the judge, come in anytime, because I don't want you to get off track since you've worked so hard to stay on.
From your experience just in your own court and seeing what percentage have some kind of mental health issue, if you looked at the whole country and the judicial system, can you share with us what percentage of people that are incarcerated that you, from your experience, may believe are there as some direct or indirect result of mental health issues?
I believe that if you walked in the jail, that the major issues in the jail are mental health, drugs, and alcohol. If you take away the substances and you take away the mental health issues, I think that the jails would be relatively empty. I mean, you have those people that may have an access to, like a personality disorder. They're just never going to change their behavior. But the access one, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, if they could get maintained on medication and stay on their medication, and we could eliminate substance abuse, which would be a wonderful challenge, that would be a wonderful goal to have in our society, I think the jails would be relatively empty. So those are the major things we face as judges.
I didn't even have to watch Scared Straight to be scared straight of going to jail. How far have the courts come? This started in 2010,
Correct.
But as you look around, whether it's you look around locally or regionally or nationally, how far have the courts come in alternative sentencing in the last few years?
Oh, in the last few years, especially locally, have gone gangbusters, I think, because of the jail situation and the prison population. And it's not just been the municipal courts, but the felony courts as well. I think that mental health courts and drug courts have been around for a very long time. In fact, I think Akron started the very first mental health court in the area, maybe even in the country, many years ago. But it has boomed in the last, let's say last 10 years maybe, to even the felony level. I would guess that a good majority of the judges in Summit County have some form of a specialized court, whether it be a drug court, mental health court. So,
in the remaining minutes that we have, I'm going to ask you for 2 or 3 word answers, which perhaps for a lawyer judge might mean 1 or 2 sentence answers, okay? But if you had to identify a major obstacle to alternative sentencing, what would a major obstacle be?
Primarily money. It takes a lot of resources for a court to get these underway, and the agencies as well. You know, they have to give a caseworker that has to devote themselves for a day at the courthouse.
So it still costs, it's just different than the kind of cost of incarceration.
Different cost, yeah. The cost is really kind of laid on either the judge, the court, or the agency themselves versus the taxpayers with incarceration.
And in a sentence or two, so that our audience that's listening and watching this is clear, the benefit to the person charged, alternative sentencing offers what? Oh,
immense benefits. The hope is when they graduate, they are going to maintain the lifestyle that they've learned over the last 2 years, and that will keep them from recommitting or reoffending and keep them out of jail.
And the benefit to their community of alternative sentencing in a sentence or two?
Safety to the community.
Now, in the fall we had an election season, and shortly we're going to be gearing up for another election season in 2016. We'll start soon. Do elections affect the judicial system? Do elections affect in any way the amount of resources that you can get for alternative sentencing?
I don't think that resources, that the elections affect resources that we can get. I think elections sometimes can be an upheaval if somebody that's been in the judicial system for a long time and maybe has these programs is removed from office. Then a new judge, that's a lot for a new judge to take on. I could not have taken on a mental health court my first years as a judge.
So if you became a Supreme Court justice tomorrow, would Stride, is that a program that would stay in effect, or would that depend on the next judge that replaced you?
That would depend on whether the other judge in the court would like to take it on. It would depend on whether the new judge would like to take it on. And quite frankly, unless that person has been around a long time, that would be very difficult, I think, for a brand new judge to take on a specialized court.
And in a word or two, what advice would you give to either current law students or people thinking about, or law students thinking about becoming a judge? What word or two of advice would you give them?
Well, first, get involved in your community. This is still a political system, so decide if you want to be a judge, where you want to be a judge, and get active in the community. And then get to know your court, get to know the court you'd like to run for, and know what the system's about and ways you can improve upon it.
I imagine that I'm not the only person that watches a lot of legal TV shows. Can you tell us something that a legal TV show gets right about the judicial process, or something that they get wrong about the judicial process?
Well, it takes a lot more out of court than it does in court. Everybody sees what happens in the trial setting, and so much more things happen outside the trial setting. It is rare that trials go forward. So, but when you see the court room, a lot of times what they're keeping in and out of evidence during the shows are very accurate.
Now, do you ever have jury trials?
I do.
Now, one time, I don't remember if it was a judge or an attorney once said to me, and perhaps a law professor, that they believe that juries get it right most of the time. From your experience, would you say that juries get it right most of the time?
I would. They always ask me when they come back after they've made a decision, would you have done that? And I can't think of a time where I would have said no. I mean, they are 50-50 chance cases usually that go to a jury, unless something odd's going on, like the defendant just does not want to plead. But yes, I've I feel
So
that
more
they get it
times
right.
than not, our
More
judicial
times.
process actually works.
It does.
My last question I want to ask you, you were appointed in March 2003 and re-elected. In one or two words, how hard is it to be a judge by day and a candidate by night?
Most difficult part of the job. I absolutely love being a judge, but being a politician or being a candidate is very difficult.
Crime and punishment may not look the same today. God, I'm sorry. Can I start again? I think I have one more close in me before I get a glass of water. Crime and punishment may not look the same today as it did 20 years ago, 200 years ago, or 2,000 years ago. And if you think about it, that's a very good thing. Sentencing continues to evolve here in Northeast Ohio, as well as the country, due to forward-thinking judges like our guest today, Lisa Coates, Stowe Municipal Court Judge. Thank you for joining us on Forum 360, on Fusion, your PBS channel, and your Rubber City radio stations. This is Leslie Ungar, your host today, bringing you a global outlook and a local view.
This program is brought to you with support from Forum 360 supporters like Electric Impulse Communications, Kim and Harvey Nelson, theakronist.com, akronbuzz.com, and the Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron.